Shards of shattered glass skittered across the sticky bar floor, catching the harsh neon light like fragments of a detonated flare. Connor's breath hitched just once, sharp, involuntary as his pupils constricted. His jaw hung open, not in confusion, but in the stunned paralysis of a man watching his reality collapse cell by cell. A faint tremor pulsed along his lower lip. He didn't blink. The room had gone dead quiet. Not bar quiet, military quiet, the kind of silence that forms when a threat enters the perimeter and every survival instinct locks into place. 12 operators stood in the doorway, silhouettes carved by the backlight spilling in from the street. Their kit was unmistakable: plate carriers molded to train torsos, comms rigs calibrated to precision, boots weighted for fast entry. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Their posture alone communicated a single fact: this wasn't theater. At their front, the woman with resolute eyes surveyed the space with the controlled breath of someone who'd cleared more rooms than the local police had ever stepped into. Her chin was set at a familiar angle one Riley had inherited. Shoulders squared, center of gravity low. The kind of stance born in ocean black nights and silent insertions. Connor's fingers twitched at his sides, a microspasm he couldn't suppress. A bead of sweat crept down his temple despite the bar's cold air conditioning. His throat flexed twice before he managed sound. You weren't lying." The words came out fractured, like a field radio cutting through interference. He wasn't looking at Riley. He didn't dare. His gaze stayed fixed on the commander, the woman whose presence made the room feel suddenly, violently small. One of the operators shifted slightly, a controlled adjustment of stance, boot grinding glass under its heel. The nose soft, deliberate tripled through the space like a warning shot. Riley stood still, silent, unreadable, a con that didn't fit the girl Connor had mocked hours earlier. The commander, Riley's mother, lifted her chin a fraction, acknowledging her daughter without turning her head. A subtle gesture, tactical, protective. The neon flickered. A beat of suspended breath. But to understand this moment, we have to go back. Riley moved along the narrow corridor behind the bar with the controlled efficiency of someone trained to conserve motion. Every reach for a bottle, every pivot toward the register, every slide of a glass across the counter followed a silent internal grid, measured, exact, economical. She never collided with another server. She never hesitated. Her gaze tracked everything. The angle of a wobbling bar stool, the twitch in a patron's shoulder telegraphing a coming argument, the misplaced rag Connor had left dripping onto live cables. She saw it all without announcing she had seen it. Connor's laughter cracked through the space like a misfired blank, round to loud, to sharp, masking insecurity beneath the theatrics. He leaned his heavy frame against the beer taps, smirking as he performed for the regulars who orbited him like bored satellites. His voice boomed again, this time timed perfectly as Riley set down a tray of drinks. "Careful, Riley," he called, spreading his arms in exaggerated warning. "Last time you almost drenched table 3, remember, or is that too advanced?" A few regulars snickered. One snorted into his whiskey. None of them had seen her hands steady, locked, flawlessly balanced. Riley didn't respond. Her face remained neutral, not cold, just contained. A quiet exhale through her nose, barely audible, gave away the irritation she swallowed whole. Connor intercepted the tip jar as a pair of college students approached the counter to pay. He flashed his signature grin, the one that never reached his eyes, and scooped a large portion from the jar into his apron. The motion was too quick for casual observers, but not for Riley. She caught the subtle shift in his wrist, the way he angled his shoulder to block her line of sight, and the faint tightening of his jaw as he prepared to lie. "Sorry, folks," he said easily. "She messed up your order earlier. I'll make sure your tip goes to the right place." Riley had served that table flawlessly. She didn't argue. Her fingers curled slightly, just enough for her knuckles to pale, then relaxed. She slid another glass into the sanitizer, recalibrating her breathing with the quiet discipline of someone who had learned long ago that confrontations were traps and patience was a weapon. Grant watched from the far end of the bar, leaning one arm on the counter. His expression barely changed, but his eyes, sharp, practiced, observant, tracked Connor's performance with thinly veiled disdain. The man had tended bars for decades, but he'd also seen enough veterans pass through to know the difference between clumsy and controlled. Riley was controlled, too controlled. He caught her mid-motion when she discreetly corrected another disaster Connor had left behind. A tap left partially open, spilling a thin stream of craft lager onto the floor. Riley moved with surgical precision, shutting the valve, wiping the puddle, and rebalancing the keg pressure with quick, practiced turns that Connor had never mastered. She didn't announce the fix, she didn't roll her eyes. She simply restored the system to working order and stepped aside before anyone noticed. But Grant noticed, his brow creased not in confusion, but in recognition. A tiny muscle flickered near his temple, the way someone reacts when a memory surfaces, it doesn't fully resolve. He'd seen reflexes like hers before, seen posture like hers, seen the way she scanned exits without appearing to look at them. He watched her lift a crate of bottles. The weight should have forced her to adjust stance or grit her teeth. Instead, she pivoted smoothly, knees bent at the right angle to protect her back, shoulders locked, movement identical to a deadlift technique used in physical readiness tests, too precise for someone untrained. Connor stomped by with another fake smile apology for imaginary errors Riley had supposedly made. His boot caught on a spilled ice cube. His body lurched. Riley stepped in, not dramatically, not enough for anyone but Grant to see, one hand subtly redirecting a bottle he almost knocked off the shelf. It was a micro-movement, nearly invisible. Connor never noticed she prevented his mistake. Grant did. The older man wiped a glass slowly, eyes narrowing just a fraction. He didn't speak, didn't ask. But a question formed silently behind his steady stare when Riley never turned to see. "What exactly are you hiding?" Riley's hands gripped the wet glassware with deliberate firmness, fingertips grazing condensation as the rim threatened to slip. The evening rush had begun in earnest. Orders pinged in rapid succession from the POS system, trays clattered across the steel counters, and the faint acrid tang of spilled spirits mingled with the metallic scent of condensation. Patrons jostled for space, and the floor glistened with rogue droplets that Connor had accidentally left behind, a subtle trap designed to provoke chaos. Her foot slid briefly on a slick spot near the draft station, a microsecond of imbalance, yet her core adjusted instantly. Hips rotated with minimal effort, knees flexed, weight shifted, muscle memory honed over countless repetitions in environments that demanded perfection. She recovered without a stumble, but the nuance of her movement was not lost on Grant. His brow lifted fractionally, the way a field medic recognizes a perfectly executed roll despite irregular terrain. Connor leaned against the edge of the bar, eyes narrowing slightly as he observed her recalibration. He maintained his posture of casual superiority, but a small tick betrayed him, a micro-blink in rapid succession, fingers flexing against the counter, an almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw. He did not speak, did not intervene. His silence, practiced as it was, became the canvas for his concealed unease. Riley's movements remained precise. She retrieved fallen glassware, wiping condensation with a tactical flick of her wrist, then stacked it safely. Each action adhered to the physics of momentum and leverage, her body distributing force to maintain balance, her breathing controlled in near-perfect rhythmic cadence. Not a single patron noticed the near miss. Not a single coworker perceived the sophistication for reflexive micro-adjustments. She pivoted toward a spilled cocktail, the liquid sliding toward the edge of the bar. Without pausing, her hand directed a controlled sweep with a microfiber cloth, guiding the flow into the sink. Her fingers gripped the edges of the tray, as though anchoring her own center of gravity, the subtle pressure precise enough to counteract any lateral torque. Grant's observation sharpened. He noted the small details, the fine tremor she allowed to pass only in the slightest flex of her wrist, the way her shoulder blades retracted for instantaneous support, the subtle alignment of her spine that mirrored tactical posture drills. He did not speak, he simply adjusted the angle of his hold on the glass he was polishing, thumb pressing slightly harder, a mimicry of readiness, recognition. Connor's hand flexed into a fist, a reflexive response he barely controlled. For a split second, his gaze wavered, a flicker of uncertainty passed through the iris, betrayed in microseconds of hesitation. He opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed, and turned back toward the customers. Yet the seed of recognition had been planted, an awareness that Riley's dexterity was not ordinary, that her pose under physical stress defied the expected reaction curve of an untrained individual. The crowd surged, oblivious to the undercurrent of calculation in Riley's every movement. She weaved through bodies with surgical precision, setting trays down at exact angles to avoid spillage, guiding patrons' hands away from wet floors with minimal gesture, a subtle choreography dictated by reflex rather than conscious thought. Her eyes scanned continuously, analyzing angles, weight distribution, and points of contact, micro-calculating each step as a tactician maps a field. Even as Connor raised a glass, intending to create another obstacle, Riley intercepted the imbalance without overt motion, a slight adjustment in grip and stance redirecting the energy safely. Her posture betrayed no effort, but the underlying muscle activation was near maximal, precisely the sort of training he had never encountered. Grant's lips pressed together, a small exhalation escaping as he processed what he had just witnessed. Connor's laughter had faded into silence, replaced by the subtle electrical hum of his unease. A twitch at the corner of his eye, a suppressed swallow, the flexing of fingers against the countertop, these microsignals revealed what his words could not. Riley finished the shift's first physical gauntlet without a single complaint, cleaning, stacking, and recalibrating as though each nearfall had been an anticipated drill. Not a patron noticed. Not a coworker except Grant, who continued to watch, recognition etching itself deeper with every flawless maneuver. Connor's voice cut through the din of the bar like a bell signaling chaos. Everyone, listen up. VIP night special orders, new system, he barked, gesturing toward the point-of-sale terminals with a flourish that was meant to intimidate, but only broadcast his own control issues. The POS system had been updated just hours before, and Connor had intentionally altered the menu mappings, scrambling the interface mid-shift. The change was impossible to navigate without prior calibration. Any misstep would delay service and expose staff incompetence. A ripple of confusion passed through the team. Waitstaff exchanged glances, fingers hovering over screens, hesitating. One misclick could ruin an entire table's order. Another could ignite patron dissatisfaction. Sweat glistened along Connor's temple, though he forced his posture into casual dominance, concealing the slight tremor in his right hand. Riley, standing slightly apart from the flurry, extracted an old, tattered notepad from beneath the bar. Its pages were filled with client preferences, allergies, and prior adjustments, a personal archive she maintained with methodical precision. She flipped it open and scanned the notes. Her eyes tracked names and patterns, synapses firing in rapid sequence. Each memory tag, each mnemonic trigger, was cross-referenced against the system glitch. Her pen danced across the margin, shorthand codes noting potential conflicts. Orders came in at a relentless pace. Patrons demanded expedited drinks, substitutions, special garnishes. Riley's hand moved to jot down corrections, but she simultaneously ran an internal mental simulation of the order flow. Drinks to table 4 check, allergies accounted for. Mains to table 6, time to kitchen prep, preempting any bottleneck. VIP preferences, subtle modifiers, even seating nuances, all logged and cross-verified. Her breath remained shallow, controlled, almost imperceptibly timed with each mental tick, a rhythmic cue that maintained clarity under extreme cognitive load. She caught a near mistake from another server, micro-adjusting a wide bottle placement to prevent spillage. The adjustment was invisible to the patrons, but it allowed her to maintain operational flow uninterrupted. Connor watched, mask firmly in place, his smile a twitching, brittle facade. The corners of his lips flickered a tick he could not suppress as he saw tables being served without a single delay or complaint. Riley recalibrated constantly, memorizing new patterns in real time. She recited order sequences silently, like a tactical countdown, preemptively correcting discrepancies before they manifested. Her eyes scanned the floor continuously, noting micro-expressions from patrons, an eyebrow raise indicating impatience, a subtle clenching of fists signaling a drink preference adjustment. Each movement informed her immediate response, each micro-cue integrated into her internal operational map. Grant observed from his station, silent and still, noting the fluidity of her execution. There was a mechanical precision in her multitasking, a cognitive layering that mirrored command and control exercises he'd seen in military simulations. He leaned slightly, lips pressing into a thin line, eyes narrowing just enough to capture the pattern without disturbing the flow of the room. Connor's forced praise emerged, clipped and brittle. "Well, good job tonight, Riley. Somehow, it all worked." His fingers clenched lightly, knuckles whitening, as he added the word somehow, a subtle acknowledgement of her skill he could not publicly admit. Fury simmered beneath the veneer, his chest rose and fell in microbursts, the respiration of someone struggling to assert dominance over an emergent competence he had not anticipated. Whispers began to circulate among the regulars, soft and speculative. "She just got lucky," one murmured. Another tilted their head, voice low. "Maybe she's, I don't know, always like this." Riley's lips remained neutral, her expression controlled, eyes forward, each microfacial tick suppressed. No affirmation, no denial, the room could only guess, and the guessing worked in her favor. As orders flowed seamlessly to tables, the high-stakes event progressed without a single failure. VIPs received exactly what they requested, timed perfectly with the kitchen's output. Drinks were balanced, garnishes correct, and the chaos Connor had engineered dissolved into the appearance of effortless execution. Each tray that Riley placed was precise, silent, and efficient, the culmination of analytical processing, memory recall, and situational awareness. Grant's lips pressed together as he noted the synchronization of cognitive and physical performance, a pattern of applied intelligence and reflexes that only a trained operative could execute under duress. Connor's eyes flickered toward her one last time. The twitch in his mouth betrayed the internal recognition. She had turned his trap into a demonstration of skill. The shattering glass was the first audible signal, steel and tempered glass colliding with a scream of high-pitched resonance that ricocheted off exposed brick and stainless steel. Riley's eyes flicked immediately to the source. Two patrons, flailing limbs, Danes pulsing at the neck as aggression escalated to violence. One man swung a fist, narrowly missing a bar stool, while the other's hand caught a broken bottle. A thin line of crimson arced across the floor, droplets scattering, each reflecting the overhead lighting like miniature warning beacons. Connor froze mid-step, chest heaving, eyes darting. His hand flexed at the bar rail, then fell slack. The smile he wore moments before was gone, replaced by a faint quiver of the lower lid and a blink that betrayed hesitation, a pause too long to be purely accidental. He opened his mouth to intervene, but the words never formed. The incident had outpaced him. His situational awareness, normally performative, had collapsed under real threat. Riley vaulted over the bar with the precision of a trained operator clearing an obstruction. Her landing was controlled, knees absorbing impact, feet placed to maximize balance on the slick surface. Her eyes swept the scene in milliseconds, registering bleeding points, angles of approach, potential vectors of further harm. She moved like a tactical medic entering an active zone, calculating risks while prioritizing casualty stabilization. Her hand closed on the wrist of the man with the bottle, twisting to disarm and redirect without adding force that could escalate injury. The other patron's arm was restrained with a subtle underhook, leveraging the attacker's momentum against him. Riley's breath was measured, almost inaudible, timed in microseconds between movements that were fluid yet exacting. Blood flowed freely from a deep laceration to the forearm, the liquid tracing lines over tile as if mapping the escalation of conflict. Riley's fingers, onto her backpack, retrieving a tourniquet improvised from a bar rag and her tactical wrist strap. She applied pressure proximal to the wound, twisting with controlled force, monitoring perfusion through capillary refill. Each adjustment was minute, precise, and entirely informed by field medical training, executed with an internal metronome that dictated timing of compression and not security. Her voice, calm, clipped, delivered instructions with the clarity of a field commander. Clear the area. Step back. M's en route. Coordinates verified. She keyed her phone, transmitting exact GPS coordinates and critical injury date. No extra words, no hesitation, a stream of actionable intelligence that emergency services could implement immediately. Grant watched, eyes narrowing into fine slits, head tilting in recognition of technique. The stabilization of the wound, the procedural precision, the controlled displacement of threats. This was not casual competence, not skill acquired in a civilian environment, military, tactical, medic training combined with operational awareness. Connor finally exhaled, a long, rattling sound through his throat, and approached the scene with hands raised in an almost apologetic motion. His face was flushed, heat radiated from his neck and ears, the skin slick with nervous perspiration. He gestured at Riley, attempting authority. You're showing off, he said, voice tight, brittle, breaking protocol. Riley ignored the rebuke, focused on secondary stabilization and maintaining situational control until EMS arrived. Each victim reassured with minimal words, hands gently adjusted to maintain immobilization, eyes scanning for additional hazards. She communicated with police on arrival, providing succinct, factual details, the number of aggressors, weapons involved, injury severity, and tactical flow of the altercation. The officers nodded in recognition, documenting the incident while murmuring commendations for her composure and operational command of the unfolding situation. Every micro-expression of Riley's face, the subtle lift of an eyebrow, the relaxed jawline, the unbroken line of sight indicated an acute assessment of threat combined with calm control. Grant's observation deepened. His lips pressed into a tight, thin line as he noted the controlled aggression, the fluid integration of medical skill and operational response. The suspicion that had been forming since her dexterity and cognitive control had hardened into certainty. Riley's background was tactical, military, trained for high-stakes response, and deliberately concealed beneath the facade of a quiet bar waitress. Connor retreated, muttering about protocol and rules, his voice lacking conviction. The blood on the floor had not only marked a physical injury, but exposed his inability to respond effectively under real pressure. Riley's silent authority filled the space, every small movement a demonstration of competence he could neither contest nor replicate. Riley's phone vibrated quietly against the metal edge of the bar, the subtle buzz almost lost amid the clatter of closing chores. She lifted it with measured precision, thumb brushing the screen with a practiced flick. The caller ID was masked, no name, no number. The message itself was brief, clipped, a series of letters and numbers, a code that resonated immediately in her mind. She repeated it silently, subvocalizing the sequence as though decoding a tactical coordinate, each syllable mapped to a mental grid. Her eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, nostrils flaring minutely, she confirmed the validity of the message. She didn't speak, she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pocketed the device and adjusted her backpack, every movement deliberate, silent, rehearsed. Grant lingered nearby, ostensibly wiping down glassware, but his peripheral vision captured a fleeting glimpse of something unmistakable. The edge of her hair had shifted, revealing a faded trident tattoo etched just behind her ear. His brow lifted imperceptibly, a micro-expression of recognition that he carefully disguised behind a casual adjustment of a towel on the counter. His eyes flicked briefly to her backpack as she adjusted the strap, and a worn military ID slipped from the open flap, catching the overhead light for a microsecond before she caught it. Grant's lips pressed into a thin line. He said nothing, deliberately ignoring what his training and experience screamed he should acknowledge, allowing the secret to remain unspoken, hidden in plain sight. Riley moved through the bar with the same quiet efficiency she had displayed all evening, yet now there was an added layer of vigilance. Every creak in the floorboards, every muffled scrape of a chair against tile, every unexpected hum from the refrigeration units was noted, analyzed, and catalogued. She flinched slightly, a loud bang from the kitchen, a drop pan, but immediately masked it with a controlled breath and a subtle recalibration of posture. Her fingers tightened briefly around a challenge coin in her pocket, the metallic edge biting into her palm, then released just as smoothly, a ritual gesture that grounded her in the present. Throughout the night, her actions left subtle markers that could easily be overlooked. A text deleted from her phone moments before Connor approached. A fleeting glance toward the emergency exit. A slight adjustment of a sleeve, covering the tattoo more carefully. Each was a conscious decision, a controlled concealment of experience and identity she had learned to master over years of operational discipline. Grant observed quietly, processing every microsignal without betraying his awareness. The way she moved with precise economy of motion. The control eye flicks that mapped the environment continuously. The subtle yet consistent muscle activations that indicated readiness. Each detail reinforced the suspicion forming in his mind. This was no ordinary waitress. Every minute action, every carefully suppressed micro-expression suggested a background steeped in training, tactical awareness, and operational secrecy. Even Connor, oblivious to the nuances of her movements, noticed the occasional anomaly. The way she intercepted potential accidents without a glance. The uncanny timing of her micro-adjustments in a crowded, chaotic environment. The regulars whispered theories her luck, her skill, but none perceived the layers beneath the surface. Riley herself remained unreadable, the perfect mask of calm professionalism. Her jaw was set, lips neutral, and her breathing measure, almost imperceptibly modulated. The coded call had passed, but its presence lingered in her muscle memory, in the subtle contraction of her shoulders, in the micro-tension at her grip. She navigated the environment with silent authority, a quiet professional operating at the intersection of observation, memory, and preparedness. By the time the last patrons had left and the lights dimmed, the bar was a tableau of ordinary chaos reclaimed, yet the hints of Riley's concealed competence remained etched in microsignals. Grant's eyes lingered, recognizing each one, cataloging them silently. The tattoo, the ID, the deleted texts, the challenge coin, the flinch, the silent recalibrations. Each a fragment of the mystery he could not yet fully articulate, but one he would not forget. The bar had transformed. Twinkling string lights hung alongside banners commemorating service and sacrifice, casting a warm glow across polished oak and stainless steel. VIP tables were positioned with deliberate spacing, ensuring optimal sightlines for both dignitaries and media cameras. News crews adjusted tripods, microphones catching the ambient hum of conversation, the faint click of lenses, the whisper of pens across notepads. Local politicians smiled politely at retired officers, nodding to those who had served, unaware of the undercurrent that would soon ripple through the event. Riley moved among the setup with her habitual economy of motion, adjusting chair angles, monitoring clear paths to exits, and subtly checking distances between tables. Her eyes scanned the room continuously, not scanning for social cues, but for operational hazards, a loose cable near the stage, a minor obstruction in the aisle, a potential collision between servers and guests. Her breath remained shallow and controlled, inhaling for exactly 2 beats, exhaling for 3, a pattern honed through years of training to maintain cognitive clarity under pressure. Connor lingered near the microphone stand, flipping through a sheaf of notes with deliberate slowness. His fingers brushed the edges of the papers, the knuckles whitening with the subtle pressure of anticipation. The corners of his lips twitched, the forced smile faltering into micro-gestures of impatience and irritation he couldn't fully mask. He adjusted his tie, tugging it slightly as if the pull might realign the confidence he knew he lacked. His eyes darted toward Riley, lingering just long enough to communicate a challenge. He cleared his throat once, an audible click of air that betrayed the internal calculation of a man attempting to assert authority in a room about to expose him. Riley's posture remained composed, shoulders squared, feet planted with precise weight distribution, hands resting lightly on the edge of the bar, fingertips brushing metal to sense vibrations from movement across the room. Her gaze was neutral, but the micro-twitch of her jaw hinted at the awareness of Connor's intentions. She did not move prematurely, did not speak, did not offer a hint. She simply observed, every micro-expression of those around her filtered through the lens of operational assessment. The VIPs began to settle, the murmured introductions and handshakes blending into a low, constant hum. Camera lenses tracked the room, reflections of light tracing along polished surfaces. Riley noted the line of sight, adjusting seating for optimal egress routes, ensuring that no one would inadvertently block access to exits or emergency points. Each motion was imperceptible to casual observers, yet essential to maintaining control in a room densely populated with high-profile figures. Connor approached the podium, clearing his throat with a calculated inflection meant to draw attention. He gripped the microphone with one hand, the other pressing a fist into his thigh, knuckles taut, a subtle release of adrenaline he could not fully contain. His voice projected easily, practiced for authority, yet the tremor beneath the surface betrayed the brittle tension of someone on the verge of exposure. And tonight, he began, pausing for effect, we honor our veterans. And, well, we also have someone here who claims a personal connection to service. Riley, he gestured with an exaggerated wave, care to prove it? The crowd shifted slightly, polite interest morphing into an unspoken curiosity. To journalists, pens hovered above notebooks, cameras pivoted subtly, and a retired officer adjusted his glasses, the slight twitch of the frame along the bridge of his nose signaling his anticipation. Connor's lips pressed into a thin line as he stepped back slightly, micro-adjusting his stance as if the weight of the room required him to dominate it physically. His gaze flicked repeatedly toward Riley, noting her stillness, the faint micro-contraction of her fingers along the bar's edge, the slight narrowing of her eyes. Each micro-signal communicated the depth of her readiness, though no one in the crowd could parse it. Riley's expression did not waver. Her jawline was set, lips neutral, eyes forward. The micro-expansion of her nostrils and the barely perceptible clench of her jaw are the only indicators of the awareness and calculation flowing behind her calm exterior. Every contingency, every vector of potential embarrassment or threat was catalogued silently. Her posture, controlled breathing, and minimal hand movements projected quiet professionalism while concealing the tactical precision that would soon manifest. Grant observed from the back, leaning subtly against a wall, fingers lightly drumming against a clipboard. His eyes tracked every micro-expression, Connor's twitching lips, the slight shift of weight from foot to foot, Riley's composed yet precise posture, the imperceptible muscle adjustments in her arms and shoulders. Recognition deepened within him. This was not mere chance, nor civilian inaptitude. This was operational discipline, trained response, and professional control calibrated for maximum impact under scrutiny. The room waited, cameras posed, politicians smiling. Retired officers leaning forward, and Connor, red-faced, posed for a public confrontation he believed he controlled, had no idea how misaligned his assumptions were. Connor raised the microphone, the polished metal cool against his palm, and forced a laugh that faltered almost immediately. Riley's seal mom fantasy, he said, voice pitched to draw attention, to provoke ridicule. He allowed a pause, scanning the faces in the room, noting smirks and polite nods, believing the momentum of embarrassment was entirely in his control. A twitch at the corner of his eye betrayed the microsecond hesitation he tried to mask. His fist flexed at his side, knuckles whitening, a reflexive echo of adrenaline coursing through a man unaccustomed to losing command. The bar door slammed open with a sharp, resonant bang that reverberated through the wooden floor and tiled walls. Conversation cut mid-word. Forks halted mid-air. Glassware trembled on trays. Patrons froze in an involuntary startle response, head snapping toward the entrance. Every microphone cable hummed slightly from the impact of the sudden movement, but the acoustics could not carry over the palpable shift in energy. Riley's mother entered, the crisp fabric of her full dress uniform catching the light in sharp lines. Medals glinted on her chest, each a testament to rigorous missions, tactical precision, and decades of disciplined service. Her posture was impeccable, shoulders squared, chin lifted, eyes scanning the room with measured authority. Behind her, a dozen operators moved in disciplined formation, boots falling in near-synchronous cadence. Each carried the subtle air of readiness, their presence a silent assertion of lethal capability and controlled restraint. Connor's eyes widened, pupils flickering with disbelief. His mouth opened and closed once, twice, then a third time, failing to form coherent words. The microphone trembled slightly in his grip as he adjusted his stance, attempting to reclaim dominance, but his chest heaved in short, irregular bursts, betraying the spike in heart rate he could not suppress. Every calculated gesture of control collapsed under the presence of undeniable authority. The SEAL commander stepped forward, voice carrying with precise resonance, projecting both command and clarity. "We're here for Riley Shee's family, and she saved a life last week." The statement landed in the room like a formal report, indisputable and complete. The words were simple, but the weight of credibility, discipline, and operational validation made them irrefutable. Riley remained still, her expression controlled, jaw set, breathing measured, as if the moment were another mission parameter to navigate. Her eyes flicked briefly to her mother, then scanned the room to ensure all angles were accounted for. Press cameras, VIPs, pads for rapid egress if necessary. She did not speak, she did not gesture. Yet, every microsignal from the slight flex of her fingers on the bar to the subtle tension along her spine communicated readiness and composure to anyone trained enough to recognize it. The unit executed a rigid salute, their movements exact to the microsecond, boots aligned, posture flawless. The effect was hypnotic, a visual cadence that drew the gaze of every patron, every VIP, every journalist in the room. Cameras captured the moment with clarity, lenses refracting the glint of metal and the disciplined pose of the operators, immortalizing the tableau. Connor's hands shook imperceptibly as he lowered the microphone, the forced authority in his stance unraveling. A micro-blink, or rapid exhalation through the nose, a slight shift of weight from foot to foot, all signals, but man recognizing his lack of leverage, his assumptions crushed under undeniable reality. The heat in his face intensified, veins in his forehead pulsed. He had prepared to humiliate Riley publicly, but the room had already acknowledged a hierarchy he could not contest. Guests murmured softly, a mixture of awe and incredulity, but the sound was contained by the gravity of the formation and the commander's presence. The energy in the bar was electric, charged with validation, authority, and the undeniable competence of Riley's hidden legacy. Every micro-expression among the audience, from widened eyes to slightly parted lips, was a testament to the silent recognition that she had never needed to prove anything. And now, the world had seen it. Grant observed from his corner, lips pressed into a tight line, eyes narrow and deliberate. Each micro signaled a flash of metals, the sharp salutes. Riley's controlled posture confirmed what he had suspected for weeks. This was operational excellence, tactical acumen, and unspoken authority, embodied in both Riley and the unit that supported her. The room was heavy with a quiet, almost suspended energy, the kind that follows a seismic shift in perception. Conversations had slowed to murmurs as the last ripple of surprise faded, replaced by a collective awareness of the truth now fully visible. Authorities, local law enforcement, and a liaison for regulatory compliance stepped forward, documentation in hand, their movements precise and deliberate. Each officer's eyes flicked toward Connor, scanning, cataloging micro-expressions for indications of intent, guilt, or resistance. Connor stood rooted near the bar, hands limp at his sides, jaw tight. His lips twitched with attempted speech that dissolved into silence, his nostrils flaring in a rapid, shallow cadence as the first wave of authority bore down. The subtle tick in his left eye betrayed the internal calculations of a man reassessing leverage he no longer possessed. Fingers twitched as though to grip the edge of the bar for support, but the pulse of adrenaline had already spiked beyond functional control. His chest rose and fell in microbursts, each exhale carrying the weight of recognition. Exposure was imminent. Grant stepped forward quietly, the faint scrape of his shoes on the floor intentionally controlled. He handed over a folder of documentation to the officer nearest him: wage reports, staff testimonies, dated incidents of abuse and misconduct, each item catalogued with forensic precision. He watched Connor's pupils dilate, noting the subtle constriction of the jaw, the small, involuntary contraction of the neck muscles, a cascade of physiological betrayals that confirmed the validity of the case. The officer's voice cut through, methodical and commanding. These documents corroborate multiple instances of wage fraud, unlawful deductions, and repeated employee intimidation. The words were clean, clipped, deliberate. No embellishment, no emotion, just a presentation of facts verified against receipts, timesheets, and witness statements. Connor's mouth opened, attempted to interrupt, but each word stumbled, slowed by the cognitive load of processing and authority he had always assumed he could manipulate. His hand clenched briefly into a fist, then released as he forced a controlled, shallow exhale through his nostrils. He glanced at the crowd, hoping for an allied disbelief or surprise, but only saw the measured faces of VIPs, journalists, and military personnel, all cataloging, observing, calculating. The bar manager moved toward him, paper in hand, the authority of the establishment now lined with regulatory and legal oversight. Effective immediately, the manager said, voice steady, your employment is terminated. You are to leave the premises. The words were precise, legally unambiguous. Connor's shoulders drooped imperceptibly, the micro-adjustment of weight forward to the toes signaling surrender, a reluctant acknowledgement of irreversible consequence. The room shifted almost imperceptibly. Initial polite applause broke, hesitant, as the first individuals acknowledged Riley's vindication. Then, recognition spread. Micro-expressions of admiration and relief flickered across faces, widened eyes, lifted eyebrows, a faint smile brushing lips. The applause grew, hands moving in a wave of acknowledgement, fingers snapping subtly, until it became a full ovation. The rhythm was organic, a crescendo of social validation amplified by the magnitude of justice executed. Riley's posture remained composed, controlled. She raised her hand briefly to acknowledge the room, Not a wave, but a subtle, precise gesture, fingers extended and relaxed, wrists straight, shoulders aligned. Her jawline was set, breathing measured, micro-tension in her knuckles releasing as the cumulative weight of recognition finally registered. She allowed herself the smallest tilt of her head toward Grant, a silent acknowledgement of the partnership, the subtle orchestration of events that had enabled this moment. Grant's lips pressed into a thin line, eyes flicking to each corner of the room to assess both reaction and flow. The sequence of micro-signals, the slight rise and fall of Riley's chest, the shift of weight in favor of balanced stance, the brief glance toward the emergency exit signaled readiness to transition from recognition to operational continuity. His own breathing was controlled, each inhale and exhale cataloged in rhythm with the applause, integrating human response with situational observation. Connor's retreat was silent, slow, measured. His eyes flickered to Riley one last time, an involuntary lift of the eyebrows betraying disbelief, while the corners of his mouth twitched in frustration. The ovation enveloped him, a tidal wave of validation he could neither counter nor deny. Each clap, each cheer, reinforced the message: authority and competence are earned through action, not posturing, and today, Riley had been fully vindicated. Riley's hands moved deliberately, extended with precision, as she shook hands with each veteran, fingers firm but controlled, palms aligned to convey respect without overstating her own presence. Each micro-motion was measured, a brief, almost imperceptible squeeze, the subtle adjustment of her thumb to reinforce a connection, followed by a smooth withdrawal. Eyes met eyes, brief and unflinching, conveying acknowledgement without elaboration. The veterans, some decades older and weathered by their own service, registered the exactitude of her demeanor, reflection of discipline and experience not immediately visible beneath civilian garb. Her mother stood nearby, posture rigid yet calm, observing the interactions with quiet approval. The faint incline of her chin, a soft lift of the corner of her lips, and the micro-nod toward Riley communicated layers of pride, respect, and relief. Riley's gaze met hers for a fraction of a second, a subtle exchange, a tacit recognition of shared history, of training passed down, of trust earned in silence. No words were needed, the micro-expressions alone carried the gravity of their bond. Grant moved closer, his expression carefully neutral, though the slight narrowing of his eyes betrayed the deep relief and acknowledgement he felt. His fingers brushed lightly against the edge of a clipboard as he spoke, voice controlled but warm. "You never needed to prove anything." Riley's lips lifted into a minimal, controlled curve, the only outward sign of acknowledgement. She allowed a breath to release, measure, and steady, micro-tension in her shoulders relaxing fractionally, yet her posture remained aligned, spine straight, head elevated. She approached the bar, each step precise, controlled, the slight pressure of her boots on the floor absorbing shock and vibration to maintain a silent rhythm. Her fingers lingered for a moment on the name badge clipped to her uniform, adjusting it with deliberate care. With a small, precise motion, she removed it and placed it neatly atop the polished surface of the bar. The gesture was unceremonious, yet it carried the weight of completion, a quiet marker that her mission here was concluded, her presence acknowledged, her competence verified. The crowd had begun to disperse, conversations rising again, but now tinged with an unmistakable deference. Cameras still turned in her direction, flashes muted by the recognition that this moment was no spectacle, but an earned acknowledgement of professionalism and courage. Riley's micro-expressions remained unreadable to all but the trained eye. Jaw set, eyes forward, breath controlled, fingers brushing lightly against her sides as she adjusted the strap of her bag in a minimalistic, practiced motion. As she reached the door, her movements remained seamless, unhurried, each step calibrated to maintain balance and awareness. A slight flicker of her eyes toward the exit and surrounding environment demonstrated continuous operational assessment. The door opened, and she stepped through, leaving behind the applause, the astonishment, and the validation, each microsignal of respect absorbed and catalogued silently by those who witnessed. Her mother's eyes followed her for a moment longer, a subtle narrowing of the eyelids, a slight exhale, and then a composed return to posture, standing rigid yet proud. Grant lingered near the bar, nodding slightly, lips pressed into a thin line, acknowledging without comment that Riley's actions had transcended expectation, and that the truth had revealed itself fully. Outside, Riley paused briefly, inhaling the cool evening air with a measured, deliberate breath. Her head remained elevated, spine aligned, shoulders squared. The street stretched ahead, a quiet promise of the next mission, the next challenge. Each micro-motion from the tilt of her chin to the subtle contraction of her fingers along the strap of her bag signaled readiness, vigilance, and the calm confidence of one trained to operate under pressure, yet fully in control. For those watching, witnessing her journey, the lesson was clear. Competence is revealed not through boast, but through action. Authority is acknowledged not by claim, but by respect earned. Her quiet departure left a lasting impression, a cinematic testament to the power of discipline, courage, and understated mastery. If you want to see more stories of quiet professionals proving their worth under impossible circumstances, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the next mission.